So, time to take another look at the morning papers. Here with me, reviewing them today, are the journalist Bidisha Mamata and the broadcaster Pete Price. So, welcome back to both of you. So, Bidisha, we're going to start with you. And last hour, we touched on the issue of the prospect of teacher strikes, didn't we? But inside the Mirror this morning, there's a double-page spread focusing on health workers as well. And one particular date, you can see in the picture there, is standing out. So why are they focusing on that?
They're focusing on all of this because even though we're in the middle of a season of strikes, the 6th of February is the date that lots of different healthcare workers across the entire sector are going to be striking simultaneously. So that includes paramedics, 999 call handlers, nurses, specialists, consultants, people who work in clinics and in wards are all going to be striking to the tune of around 30,000 people. This is a strike over pay disputes as well as other terms and conditions of being treated well as a worker, not overworked, not underpaid. And of course, we know that this has been brewing for a very long time. The disruption that's going to be caused by this is ameliorated somewhat because the trusts have been able to negotiate that some very essential services such as dialysis, cancer treatment, maternity wards, they won't be shut down. Of course, people need those and they're extremely urgent and vital services. But what it points to, as the strikers have said all along, is that they don't want to be doing this. They would not strike unless all other attempts to talk to management had failed. And generally speaking, I do think that the public are on the side of nurses and doctors and consultants, ambulance workers, hospital workers. There is broad public support for them, simply because this is not some sort of jobs worth sector. You go into the healthcare sector with a sense of vocation, a sense of wanting to help people, a sense of wanting to pay into society with all of your labour. And we already know that healthcare workers will routinely work unpaid into their next shift or into their next lot of hours when they don't have to, because they care so much about the people they're looking after.
Yeah, and here they do quote a spokesperson for Rishi Sunak saying it was disappointing that strike action would take place amid what they say were major strains on the NHS. And they talk about how the government wants a resolution and to come to an agreement. But yes, February the 6th is one for the diary, certainly. Pete, let's move us on, shall we, to the Daily Express, and an article here after a week of horrendous revelations from within the police, an article here about that. So what's the Express saying?
Well, the picture speaks volumes. It's a domestic abuse charity that have left this basket of rotten apples, 1,071 bad apples, on the steps of Scotland Yard. And it just says, the message just simply says, bad apples, how many more? It shows the frustration. Every day we've been hearing in the papers how bad it is. But I remember when I was on radio years ago doing late night phone-ins, the myths around rape, for instance, without any shadow of a doubt, no means no. End of story. But there are people saying, yeah, but the way she was dressed, she brought it on herself. All these myths, all these vilenesses must be got rid of. Nobody should abuse anybody else's body, especially somebody who is in authority. Don't get me wrong, we've got some fabulous police in this country, some fabulous police in London, but this has got to be sorted. No means no. Do not abuse anybody else.
Yeah, strong message there, Pete. And just to say, the 1,071 bad apples it represents, according to the domestic abuse charity Refuge, the Met officers and staff who have been or are under investigation for abuse or violence against females. So that makes it clear what they mean by that figure. Bidisha, take us to the Times next. The headline for the article you want to talk about is calls for tax cuts could be a major problem for PM.
Yes, this double-page spread is a sort of school report on Rishi Sunak, and I always mention him in these terms because I don't think he can ever escape this image he has of being the sort of diligent, maths-loving chancellor who became prime minister. As the expected strains on the economy turned out not to be quite so much of a strain, this article is saying that the next thing that's going to happen is that backbenchers are going to pressure Rishi Sunak into opting for tax cuts. They're frustrated, in fact, by his very competence as a chancellor. He is a traditional, really quite orthodox, oddly centrist kind of chancellor. If you look at his economics, part of the reason that the Labour opposition couldn't gain much traction during the pandemic years is because the kinds of economic measures that Rishi Sunak was putting into place borrowed equally from the Conservative and the Labour playbook. And yet now, of course, you've got slightly more economically extreme people in his party saying, look, you need to start standing up for business and for the rich people and have tax cuts, because that's traditionally what the Tories have done. I don't think he's really going to do that. And in fact, if you look at the rest of that double-page spread, it's much more about levelling up. Where is the money going to go in terms of looking at a national strategy, not just getting very rich companies and very rich individuals to have a slightly more comfortable margin for themselves?
We have very little time. I'm desperate to talk about Dunking Biscuits, but Pete, I know it's not your story in particular. Have you seen this story?
No, I was going to talk about funerals.
I know. I thought funerals or biscuits, and I'm being very frivolous, but I thought let's have 20 seconds on biscuits. Badisha, very briefly explain what it is.
An urgent new report has come in that when we have our tea, we are no longer dunking sweet little biscuits into it. The young and the health conscious and the emergent squillennial vegan generation are either going for no snacks or savoury snacks, or they simply don't have time to kick back with a sweet little cookie.
Okay. Pete, are you a dunker, very briefly?
I'll have biscuits at my funeral.
Okay. Thanks both very much.